Hello and welcome back to MediaBeat. I'm Chris Ariens, editorial director of MediaBeat.com. We're here with Bill Weir, anchor of ABC's Nightline. We want to talk a little bit more about how you got into TV news. You grew up in Wisconsin.
I did.
Spent your formative years there.
Yep.
And then you went about as far west as you could for college to Pepperdine University.
That's right. That's right.
Then you came back with your first first reporting jobs and then anchor jobs in Minnesota, Wisconsin, on to Chicago. Why did you come back?
I'd like to say that it was a choice, but in those days, back in the old timey days of television, kids, this is pre-internet. How ancient is that? But the job search entailed getting a copy of Broadcasting Magazine's yearbook that had every TV station in it. And when I came out of Pepperdine, I said, I'm going to give myself a year to get a job as a TV reporter. And if I can't do that, I'll just go 10 bar in Mexico or something. So I went and I made a list. It's like, you go through and let me see. San Diego, yes, I could work in San Diego. Las Vegas, yeah, sure, that'll be fun. And you make this list and you send out 25 3/4-inch resume tapes and you hear nothing and you go back through the list. Let's see, Des Moines, sure, I could work in Des Moines, and it was that sort of thing. So after 8 months, I got my first job in Minnesota. It was a blind box ad. Worked there a year. And there was an opening in Green Bay, and I applied to that. And you'll appreciate this, a fellow Wisconsinite.
That's right.
This
Worked
is
at the same station.
That's
there in
right.
Green Bay.
WLUK. I go in for my interview, and the news director at the time says, "I'm going to show you how it's going to be here," and he puts in an air check from the night of the first Gulf War. And the anchor comes on and says, "Good evening. The United States has declared war in Iraq. Troops are amassing in the Gulf." More on that in a moment. First, highlights of tonight's Packers scrimmage.
Of course. Scrimmage, not even a game.
It wasn't even a game, it was a scrimmage. And we led with the Packers, led the newscast. What would you say, 200 nights a year?
Easily.
Yeah.
Yeah. Certainly every Sunday, every Monday.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit more about that experience
Okay.
as well as being as a sports guy in a little bit. But as part of a series for ABC World News, you went back to Milwaukee recently.
I did, yeah.
You got on a Harley and you rode around the town and you went to the place where you grew up. Part of a series about how some of these towns where the ABC News anchors are from are coping during the recession. What was that like going back and seeing where you grew up and how it's changed?
It was surreal. It's surreal. I haven't been back to this. We grew up, my folks split up, and my mom and I lived in a VA housing project when I was small. Called Berryland, and I had heard all these horror stories about how that neighborhood had just really become depressed and sort of crime-ridden, and I hadn't been back since I was 10 or 11 years old. As luck would have it, I roll up, I realized that was my old apartment, just as a FedEx guy was delivering a package to the woman who lives there, and she looked at me and said, "You're on TV." I said, "I used to live here."
Wow.
"Can I come in?" "Yeah. Let me get some clothes on," So,
And there you had your story.
and then that was the story. And then on top of it, she was a perfect example because she had worked in manufacturing, Milwaukee, this one Rust Belt city that had 750,000 people at one time when all those factories were really pumping. Saw the writing on the wall, got out of it, took some public training, started her own business, runs a little bakery now, and is very enthusiastic and positive.
We talked a little bit about this in the last segment about how the business is changing, and you're going to have a change in the leadership at ABC News soon. What's sort of the talk inside with your colleagues when you talk about the future of the network, and what are your expectations?
The consensus seems to be that nobody knows exactly what's going on. You hear the rumors. There are internal candidates, strong internal candidates that have been mentioned. Just by virtue of the success of Nightline, my executive producer, James Goldston, is certainly in that mix. I think people are of two minds, that we really need a dyed-in-the-wool newsman to maintain, what it is we have and bar the door against any further erosion in the resources that we need to keep our integrity. But then there's the pragmatic attitude, which is it wouldn't be so bad if they found some Harvard MBA dropout who made $1 billion in a web startup. I mean, we know how to cover the news. The big question is how you monetize the web, how you decide that on this particular day you should be focused on content for the iPad as opposed to World News or Nightline, the old traditional model. So it'll be really interesting to find out whoever that is going to be.
We've seen a fair number of journalists recently who have been suspended or fired for things they've said or done. Keith Olbermann, Rick Sanchez, Juan Williams, Helen Thomas, the list seems to go on and on. Do you ever worry about the things you say or the way that you, I don't know, live your life outside of your news persona and how it might be perceived?
Yeah. Well, I have drastically scaled down the size of my meth lab.
That's good.
Just out of, abundance of caution on that.
Smart, wise.
Yes. And I no longer tweet, race baiting comments. I made my salary for years as kind of being the smartass, on the end of the desk, but especially when I was doing sports. And that allowed for that. It was a way to liven up those Clipper highlights on a nightly basis. But when I came to ABC and they took a shot on me and sent me to war zones and hurricanes, I took that incredibly seriously. And I didn't want, once you decide that this is the path and this is your job, you set all of that aside. And then, doing GMA, I miss the spontaneity. That's really where it's going to happen. If it's going to happen, it's in a live, heated satellite interview or in a moment where you toss off a bon mot. But I think that I survived that. And yeah, I mean, we're at such a bizarre time in terms of what the audience expectations are, how we're competing for eyeballs every night. It's tempting to take the easy route and either take an ideological tack or squirt seltzer down your pants or do whatever it is to get attention. But I won't be making those mistakes, I hope.
Good.
And then you'll air this, and then when I do
flame
out famously,
I can't make any promises.
You'll have this in the can.
No. We're going to talk more about Bill Weir, the wise ass, in our next segment, his sports background and how it led him to ABC News here in New York. This is MediaBeat. I'm Chris Ariens, along with Bill Weir. We're back for part 3 after that.